and I love somebody else. If I can love myself enough to know when it's time to let go. See, I just wanna be so happy, but the answer lies in me. I do believe that wanna be happy, yes, to be happy, and to find a love that's mine will be so sweet. All I really want is to be happy, and to find a love that's mine will be so sweet. All I really want is to be happy, and to find a love that's mine. It will be so sweet.
At what age did you hit puberty?
Oh gosh. Probably 11.
11. Okay. So between the ages of let's just say 1 and 11, right? What were
Mhm.
your relationships like with men or boys? Did you have any relationships with men or boys, including your father, but other than your father, since we know already that you did have a relationship with him?
Yeah, I had a great relationship with my dad. I mean, I'm the youngest of two, so my dad and I was very bonded with my dad as a little girl. And I always wanted to be everywhere my dad was and followed him around. My dad was very handy, so I remember he would like be working on the cars outside and I would pass him tools and stuff like that. So I became very handy because of that reason. And yeah, so my dad and I mean, I was like his little bulldog. And other than that, I had a lot of contact with my cousins. So all of my mom's sisters, they all had like kids more or less around the same time frame. So we grew up. We had a little group of cousins of boys and girls, but those were the only other boys that I really had any type of relationships with, I guess, so to speak, growing up that were consistent in any kind of way. Other than that,
Mhm.
my our parents were pretty strict. We grew up in like a strict Christian Latino household. We didn't have sleepovers and we didn't have a lot of friends that were boys. I remember some of the kids down the street, they were a brother and a sister, and they were our same ages. So we grew up really close to them. They were like our best friends down the street, our neighbors. But other than that, not a lot of boys around us.
Mm. Okay.
Probably not until
So
high school where we when we got older, right?
yeah, we're gonna get into that in a second. So, um, you said you think you hit puberty around, or you remember hitting puberty around 11 years old, right? So what was that transition like? Did you have a good transition going from what is it, a prepubescent child, right, to now you're developing? I know I've had conversations with women where they would say, they went to bed one day and they were flat chested and they woke up the next and they had boobs, and now the kids in school are treating them differently, right? Some of the experiences not
Yeah.
so good, some of the experiences, hey, a lot of people like me now, right? So what was your puberty experience like?
Yeah, I mean that definitely was not me. It doesn't describe me at all.
Hmm.
I've always been very thin, and I didn't really like develop a body shape until probably my early 20s. To be honest with you, I mean I was always like real thin, literally weighed 100 pounds with my hair wet, all the way through like 20 years of age. So I don't think I really started to like develop and like put on a little bit of weight and have like a woman's body, so to speak, until I was probably 20, 19 or 20.
Wow.
But before that, I mean, as far as transitioning into puberty, I think that time is just so it's very confusing and emotionally painful and awkward for girls.
Hmm.
especially girls who develop young because your other girls in your class are not there, right? So, as a little girl, let's say 11 years old is like fifth grade, so you're dealing with like having your period and body hair and things like that is very confusing and strange because especially if other girls aren't talking about it and aren't experiencing it. I think for my sister and I, one of the things that we are lucky, I'm going to say, and I'm using that word because I recognize that we were blessed, but I only recognize that now as an adult, right? Like I can see
Hmm.
that looking back. We were blessed to have a mom who talked to us about everything, who told us in advance what was going to happen before it happened, who talked to us about periods and boys and sex and our bodies. And, she really did a lot to prepare us for what was coming. Um, in a way that I think back then it was kind of like, oh, mom, that's gross. Like, stop talking about that stuff. Like, I don't want to hear it. Like, get out of here with that stuff.
Right.
But like when it came down to it, I'm just really thankful that like neither one of us went through those stages of our lives surprised, like what's happening. Like we knew what was going to happen and what was happening the moment it started.
Hmm. Um, so I want to talk about school for a second, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I want to talk about it in two different ways. I want to talk about it from an academic standpoint, and I also want to talk about it from a relationship with boys standpoint, right?
Sure.
So from what is it called? Middle school, right? So from middle school, we're talking 6th, 7th, 8th grade. Were you developing relationships with boys at this time?
I would say probably closer to eighth grade.
Okay.
Probably closer to eighth grade. I remember in middle school. I mean, I was like a popular kid in
Mm-hmm.
middle school, but I was also very much involved in academics. I think mostly I was popular because I was very kind and
Mm-hmm.
genuine as a person. So I had a lot of friends. And my friend group was big, but it was also very, very diverse. And so I
Mm-hmm.
had a lot of boys and girls in my friend group. Um, and I would maintain contact with, the kids that I rode the bus with and that lived in my neighborhood. And we would be outside playing together until my parents called us to come back inside, right before it got dark or whatever.
Right.
Those are good memories. That was like back in the day when people could do that with their kids, and when
Mm-hmm.
kids had an interest in playing outside.
And so you said
Remember, I'm
you,
40.
yeah, it's
Right, so
still
I was like a 90s kid.
right, yeah, like it's still tripping me out that you're
Yeah.
40. But you so you even in the middle school, right, you were very into academics, so you were getting good grades and there was
Yeah.
no issues there, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I was like super academically focused. I think because I came from immigrant parents, in our household was very focused on, um, you know, uh, becoming an educated person because we were the first generation that was coming up and that was going to be educated in the United States and in American schools, and that we were the first generation that was going to be educated in English.
Mm-hmm.
My parents didn't have that. My parents were raised in their own countries, and the schooling that they had was all in Spanish. So if there was any kind of like difficult clash, it was the clash of speaking both languages as a child, and to have to be like an interpreter and a translator for our parents,
Right.
basic, and to have to be the ones to speak on their behalf in adult situations. That was hard on us as kids. Our parents, let's say my mom would say, call this 800 number and act like you're me and talk about, like the electric bill or something like that. And I was hating that. I hated it so much. But, we did what we were told because our mom wanted us to, and we respected her a lot. We were kind of scared of her. I might still be a little scared of her.
So um Now you're going into high school, right? This is the big deal for most American kids. I don't care what their ethnicity or race is, right? High school, they start talking to you about it like once you're in the sixth, seventh grade, and they build it up to be this really big deal. And then you kind of go into high school and it's like, oh, it's just school again, right? So but the class is okay, they get a little bit different, the scheduling is a little bit different, right? So transitioning into high school, um did you maintain that focus academically, and did you begin to further develop your relationships with boys at this particular time? Did the boys ever become a distraction, or were you able to just maintain that focus?
Yeah. So in high school is when I started branching out from academics into sports, and really starting to develop as an athlete. So I did varsity track and field when I was in ninth grade. So I started, really like doing activities that were taking up a lot of my time and energy, in addition to academics. So I didn't really have as much of a social life. Then when I was in 10th grade, I started doing martial arts. And then by the time I was a junior, I started working. I got a job. I had to get a job because I really felt the pressure to, not because my parents were telling me to get a job, but I felt like a duty and responsibility, and yeah, maybe some pressure to alleviate their financial burden